everybody, my name is Jessica Ellsworth. I wanted to ask you all if you've ever heard that vaccines cause autism or are just generally unsafe. Now, these claims have been proven to be scientifically false. However, people still believe them, and I'd like to dive a little bit into why that is and kind of give you some science and facts behind these debates and let you make your own decision for yourself. Now, the first thing I would like to talk about is Andrew Wakefield. Now, according to Nature Immunology, Andrew Wakefield is a former doctor. In 1998, he made the Wakefield studies. Him and his colleagues produced a paper, or a publication for the paper The Lancet, about his Wakefield studies, which claimed to link the MMR vaccine, which is the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, to autism. Now, at the time, there was a lot of belief that the environment around a child is what might cause them to have autism. However, after he published this study, Wakefield published this study, a lot of people kind of stopped believing in that and immediately believed in this autism theory instead. According to Offit from the New York State Department of Health, there's two major flaws with the Wakefield study. The first one is that children were given the MMR vaccine at a certain age or around a certain age, and that is also around the certain age that kids usually can be detected and diagnosed for autism. So up until a certain age, babies don't have enough symptoms that doctors can tell that they have autism yet. But they just happen to start showing those symptoms around the time that doctors recommend children get the MMR vaccine. Now, this means there is a correlation between the MMR vaccine and autism, but correlation does not equal causation. Now, just to explain this a little bit further, just to provide an example, I might eat cornflakes for a week and then end up getting really, really sick and end up in the hospital. But that doesn't mean that it's the cornflakes' fault. That could have nothing to do with it. It could just be that I was having those happen in a very similar time frame. So that's kind of like this. Just because the MMR vaccine is given around the same time that kids are diagnosed, there's no actual proof that there's a causal link between the two. Now, the second huge issue with the Wakefield study is that if you're doing a study like this, you should study both unvaccinated and vaccinated children in order to avoid a biased study. However, Wakefield didn't do this. He only studied vaccinated kids. Now, the results of this entire study was that it was retracted from the scientific world, basically. They took it off of the scientific data, took out of the paper, basically said that it was fraudulent, the data was fraudulent, and it was a fraudulent study. He was also charged with scientific misconduct, and he was stripped of his title as a doctor. Now, according to Pfefferman and en150, there was a major conflict of interest with this study as well, and that was that it was funded by personal injury lawyers. Now, the clients for these lawyers were actually suing the makers of the MMR vaccine. So that's a big conflict of interest. That means that it's highly possible that Wakefield did this study specifically to find a link between the two. Now, when you're doing a scientific study, you should ask, is there a link? But you shouldn't be going out specifically to find something, specifically to prove something. And that was one major issue with his study. And because of that, many people still believe his claims because he tried to prove something. A lot of people still believe these claims even though they were redacted, and he was stripped of his scientific name as doctor. Now, according to Pfefferman and en150, herd immunity is something really important, and this is like a key reason why it's important that everybody gets their vaccines and why there are some laws about it. Now, there are people like babies, old people, and people with compromised immune systems who can't get these vaccines due to medical reasons. Now, this means that they are very, very vulnerable to these diseases, so we act as a wall around them, protecting them. And by we, I mean people who do get vaccinated. So if people all around these people get vaccinated, they're way less likely to come into contact with the disease, and it offers sort of a protection around them. So if people stop getting vaccinated, those people who can't get vaccines, such as little babies, are much more likely to get these diseases. Now, according to Nature Immunology, the measles virus was eradicated from the U.S. before the 1990s. However, it's recently making a pretty big comeback, as well as other diseases as well, such as mumps. they're all making pretty big comebacks in the form of outbreaks. Now, a large reason for this is because around the 1990s is when Wakefield did his study, and then a lot of people started to believe that vaccines weren't good for you, so more people are refusing to get vaccines. Now, this means that people who aren't vaccinated may go to other countries, such as Europe, where there are still diseases such as measles and mumps that haven't been eradicated, and then they bring those diseases back into the U.S. and cause outbreaks among the people who weren't vaccinated. And this is very dangerous for people who need that herd immunity because it leaves them super, super vulnerable. Now, another big issue presented to us by Pfefferman and Novova is that before vaccines, if you got a disease, it was usually in your childhood. If the measles, mumps, rubella are considered childhood vaccines. However, because there's been such a long time of people not getting them because of vaccines, nowadays if you were to get it, it would be much, much worse. You'd have a much more severe reaction and be more likely to, unfortunately, die or have a disability. So that means those people with herd immunity, if you don't get vaccines, are protected and could experience the worst case scenario if they were to catch this disease. But also, if you don't vaccinate or you don't get your children vaccinated, if they do catch this disease, then it could end up being a worst case scenario and a lot worse than back before the pre-vaccination era. So basically that's the science and the facts behind this vaccine debate, and I hope you guys have learned enough to make a nice, well-informed decision. So thank you guys.